So you were just friends for a period of time?
Yeah, several months we were just friends.
And you were telling us he became your boyfriend at that point, so I'm assuming there's some point in time that you two began dating.
Yeah, the girl broke up with him, and there was a period of time where he was single and I was single, and we started just talking more and more. And then I think it was on New Year's that year when I was a freshman, we decided to become boyfriend-girlfriend.
Okay. And then you said that was your sophomore, the beginning of your sophomore year? Or?
I would have still been a freshman then.
Okay. And you said you were going to become boyfriend and girlfriend with
yes.
him. Okay, you guys decided that. Was he still in high school at that point in time?
No, he was out of high school.
And to your recollection, was he working at that point in time?
No, he wasn't working.
Okay. Describe for us then what being boyfriend and girlfriend at that stage in your life meant for you and Mr. Juarez.
For us, I didn't have a car, I didn't have a driver's license yet. I think I was getting my permit that year. So he would come to town, and so during lunch, a lot of kids would leave campus, and there is a small gas station, USA gas station near the high school. So I would walk down there and he would be there. There was an arcade there, and he really liked video games, so we would meet there and just hang out, hold hands, that kind of thing.
Okay. How long at this point in time, how long did you date Bobby continuously from the time that you were 15 till you moved out of the home?
No, we stayed together for a while, and I think at age 15 I felt like the relationship was getting very intense. He was talking about being together forever, and I loved him, but I didn't feel like I was in love with him, and I knew at age 15 there's no way I could decide who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with at that point. So he wanted to move to San Francisco, and he had all kinds of wild ideas, they seemed fun, but they were just not where I was. So at that point I broke up with him.
What do you mean wild ideas?
Well, he entertained the belief in vampires, and he thought, well, let's go to San Francisco and see if we can find some real vampires. And, I used to read Anne Rice novels at the time. It didn't seem realistic to me, but it seemed like it was just an idea that I would go along with, with him.
And this was at a time when you were about 15 years of age. You wanted to move to San Francisco and hunt vampires, right?
So we could live together forever and be together forever.
Was there a certain point in time then when this was going on and you said it was getting too intense for you? Did you and Mr. Juarez break up?
Yes. It was one afternoon. I broke up with him on the phone. I don't know where my parents were, but my Aunt Lisa was at the house. She was picking my brother and I up. I was having this conversation with him. He was very upset. And Lisa wanted us to leave. She wanted to take us. We had to go somewhere with her. So I didn't have time to stay on the phone with him for a long time and talk through it with him. So I had to sort of abruptly end the phone call shortly thereafter, and it was, I don't know, I guess he didn't take that well.
What do you mean by you guess he didn't take it that well?
I found out a few years later that he... Approach.
She's testifying right now about a prior relationship. She met this guy when she was 15. He was 18. She just told the jury that this boyfriend ended up killing himself. Let's go back inside the courtroom.
Reiterate that. So, at the time I was non-denominational Christian, and this seemed important. So, I thought that Bobby should know about it, because at the time he wasn't religious, and he was uncertain about his spirituality. At least when I last had known him. So to me it was important that he at least hear that information, so he could make a decision for himself. So I made contact with him again and called him in, I think, mid-September 2007.
Okay,
I'm sorry, 1997.
just so we're clear, in terms of your high school years, how long of a break, I guess, was there between this phone call that you made to break up with Mr. Juarez and the phone call you made to recontact him? How long of a break or was there in between those two?
I'd say, let's see, maybe 19 months.
So you make this phone call to Mr. Juarez, and you said this was in 1997?
Yes.
Okay. And where would you have been in school then? Would you be in junior year? Or?
I was just starting my junior year.
Okay. And subsequent to this phone call, did you begin to make a friendship with Mr. Juarez? Tell us about how that evolved.
Well, when I first called, he answered the phone. I could recognize his voice. And I said, "Is Bobby there?" And he said, "Yeah, who's this?" And I said, "Jodi." And I immediately heard a click. So I left it alone, and I thought, okay, because our last phone call some years back didn't end well. And so the next night I tried one more time, and the same thing happened. So I left it alone. And about...
Let me ask you this before we continue. You mentioned that Wairika was a pretty small town, right?
Yes.
Okay. You never ran into Mr. Juarez in between these two phone calls?
No, he didn't live in Wairika. He lived in Montague, which is 6 miles from Wairika. It's even smaller. I think there's about 1,000 people in that town.
Okay. But never during this time did you run into him at all?
No.
Okay. And I'm sorry, you talked about you called him a couple times, you would click on the other end of the phone. How does the relationship progress from that point?
I don't know how many days later. It was under a week, maybe 4 days, maybe 5 days. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and we were talking, and I heard the call waiting beep, so I clicked over, and I heard someone say, "Is Jodi there?" And I recognized his voice, so I clicked back over and said, "I have to call you back." So I clicked back over, and we started talking again.
Okay. Did you, after that conversation, did you become friends again? Did you start dating again? Just describe that for us.
Yeah, I felt kind of silly explaining to him why I was calling him, especially knowing that his religious beliefs at that time were not really defined. And I kind of expected him to laugh at me, but it was important to me. So I told him the reason I was calling, and
overruled. You may continue.
He expressed appreciation for that, which surprised me. We just sort of picked up from there and began talking again.
Room. The reason for that short interlude right there, they switched out court reporters, but now they're ready to go.
And all counsel, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. There was a computer issue. It resulted in us needing to substitute court reporters. You may continue, Mr. Newell.
Thank you. Ms. Arias, before we took a break, I believe we were talking about the point in time in your life when you got back together with Bobby Juarez.
Yes.
And from what I understood earlier, you were about 17 years of age when that took place. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were talking about how he had called you, responded to your initial phone contact. Tell us how the relationship progressed from him making telephone contact with you.
Well, at the time I had a boyfriend. He lived in another country. So we corresponded. So it wasn't a romantic reason. Like I had said, I reached out to him for a spiritual reason. I don't know if he was seeing anybody at that time. I don't think he was. He used to call a party line a lot and meet people on that. I guess this was before the internet was really, in every single home.
Let me interrupt you a little bit there on a couple of different things. You said he made contact on a party line. What is that? Can you describe that for us?
From my understanding, I didn't talk on it, but from my understanding, it was a 900 number that you could call, and it's like a chat room, but it's on the telephone instead of on the computer.
And you chatted to Bobby that way, or
I didn't. He chatted with other people that way.
And you also mentioned, I don't want to get too far from it, you mentioned that when he made this contact with you, after the contact he made for what you described as spiritual reasons, you said that you had a boyfriend in another country, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that boyfriend's name?
Victor.
Did Victor have a last name?
Arias, ironically.
I'm sorry, what?
His last name was also Arias.
Okay. And where did you meet Victor Arias?
The summer that I turned 17, right before I turned 17 in July, I flew to Costa Rica on an exchange program, and I spent 3 weeks there with a family. Their name was also Arias, and they had 2 sons and 2 daughters in that family, and the oldest son was just a little older than me, and so we kind of clicked and got to know each other and sort of had a little romance kind of blossom thing. I don't know, it's like my first experience of like the warm fuzzy, somebody that I really felt that I cared for.
Okay, and that relationship lasted a few weeks, or tell me how it lasted beyond your being there.
It sort of began to develop while I was in Costa Rica, and I flew back toward the end of, I had my 17th birthday there in that country, and then I flew back at near the end of July, and we corresponded and talked occasionally on the phone through August, and then he flew to the United States that September and stayed in Redding, which is a city about 100 miles south of Wairika. He had some people that he knew there. He stayed there about a week, I think, and then stayed at my house for 2 weeks before flying back.
And when did he come stay for you for 2 weeks? When was that?
That was early September 1997.
Okay. So this is about the time then that you were close to the time that you were in contact with Mr. Juarez as well, right?
Yes, it was just right before that.
Okay. And you considered Mr. Arias to be a boyfriend?
Yeah, actually he had given me a ring, and it was kind of a promise ring, like we were going to get married, but we weren't officially engaged. So we would talk about children and marriage, and he wanted me to come live down there and start a family.
Okay. Well, you said it's your first experience of, I guess, what we call young love, right?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I wouldn't say totally in love, but it was my first taste of being like, just feeling like warm about somebody, if that makes sense.
As it relates to your situation then, Mr. Arias, Victor, he goes back to Costa Rica, I assume, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the relationship becomes one probably, is it primarily of letters, phone calls? Describe that for us.
Yeah, we wrote a lot. The postman actually got to know my name and face, and he would tease me every time I went to the post office to get it stamped to send to Costa Rica, and I would receive letters from him that were really romantic, and the Spanish language is very romantic, so he would write things like that, very romantic.
Okay, and relative to your age, how old was Victor?
I don't remember his exact age. I want to say he was about a year older than me. I think we were just, we were very close in age, but he was older than me.
Okay. Now, when you started interacting with Mr. Juarez again, and we've heard from your earlier testimony that he became your boyfriend at a certain point in time when you were around 17 years old, right?
Yes.
Okay.